Hey Member 10K, welcome back here. Week 5, jumping into it, looking to learn a little bit more and see better results. More progress is why we're here this week, right? Now, if there's anything that we've learned in the last 5 weeks is it's complicated. We've seen good weeks, we've seen bad weeks. We want to learn all that we can from the good weeks, and we want to figure out what the heck is going on with those tough weeks. And so diving in a little bit deeper into some of that this week here, some understanding of that equation we call energy balance. We know it's, we're gonna find the results or the outcomes that we like when we find the balance of energy in to the balance of energy out. Now, as we dissect those a little bit more and go into some of those subcategories of energy in and energy out, we might be able to unlock some additional techniques or additional understanding for you guys to see better results here. So first off, as we look at that idea here, you're following the food plan, you're eating on time, and you're getting your MyZones in, your workouts in, trying to figure out what's that balance. Is it eating less? Is it working out more? Let's start to dive into those details here just a bit more, right? Remember, the idea of energy in is not just as simple as counting calories. Calories, in fact, in themselves, the idea of that calorimetry is kind of an older science, and it's not a uniform, universal. Sometimes there's a lot of variability in the idea of what that food label might say, and the amount of calories that are actually getting into our body, then the amount of calories that are actually being absorbed into our body. Some of the studies might show as far as 20 to 25% variability of what's advertised on that food label to what's actually getting into your body, right? So what you think might be eaten just a little bit, you might actually be taking in more than what's calculated in your calorie count. Keep that in mind, right? So again, we'll revisit that idea we talked about last week, the outcomes-based decision making, right? And we'll really kind of layer that throughout here, because if your equation isn't ending up what you would like it at the end, then there's something going on. We might have our numbers mixed up somewhere throughout that equation. So counting calories in might be that missed piece of the equation, right? Going into some of those other variables as well. How our body processes food is very, very unique as well. So whether the food is processed, say peanut butter versus peanuts, and that could have a huge variability in how much is actually being absorbed into our body, right? Two factors on that is the idea that if that fiber or breaking down that food, that takes a lot of energy to break down food. There's called a thermodynamic effect, right? That thermodynamic effect of eating actually takes energy. So if we have foods that are unprocessed, and our body has to do extra work to process that food, we're burning more calories. That's a plus, that's a good thing. Foods that are already very, very processed, they tend to be absorbed at a higher rate into our body. Our body has to do less work and is able to pull more calories out of that, and so we might be absorbing, or we will be absorbing, more calories. And so that balance or that equation could be offset depending on the processing of our foods. Take, for example, something like a raw, unprocessed sweet potato versus a cooked sweet potato, which then changes the chemistry of that food. Could be upwards of 3 times the calories in that conversion, just due to the fact that an uncooked starch of that sweet potato isn't necessarily processed. The body has to continue to metabolize those different starches, versus when we cook it, it's converted into something that's very, very easily pulled in and absorbed into the body. So those types of variables, those types of factors do really, really impact our calorie intake, right? How it's absorbed, how it's processed, and how it's put into play in our body. So keep it in mind and starting to get a better idea based on what you are using and what you are doing and what those outcomes are looking like, what's going to be the best practice for you to get those outcomes that you're after, right? So those are some intake variables. As far as some output or outgoing calories going, we know that we're getting in our activity. We know that we want to increase our metabolic rate, so making sure we have a good resistance form. A lot of heavy lifting throughout the week is going to help our body repair that muscle, rebuild that muscle, come back nice and lean, nice and strong. But also, don't forget the idea of NEAT. Some of you guys may have heard that acronym before. It is non-exercise activity, and that non-exercise activity or thermodynamic burn, that is things like parking a little bit farther away, things like chit-chatting on the phone while pacing up and down the hallways, it's fidgeting at work. Those things that are not necessarily planned activity, they add up, and they can continue to add to your given day. So are we creating that environment to increase that idea of NEAT, right? So it can get very, very complicated. If we wanted to simplify it, here it is. The holy grail is we know that our body's gonna find a nice equilibrium, a nice balance. Here's the magic number. Men, it's 6 to 8. Women, it's 4 to 6. What are we talking about? Men, for those of you guys fairly active, 6 to 8. It's palm size portions of protein throughout a given day. It's 6 to 8 fists of fruits and veggies throughout the given day, and it's 6 to 8 of those cupfuls for healthy unprocessed carbohydrates throughout a given day, and 6 to 8 of those thumbfuls of healthy fats. Women, same thing. Our magic number is 4 to 6. So it's simplifying it rather than trying to count all these calories and factor in all these things, using these constants of measurement, right? So 4 to 6 palm-sized proteins, 4 to 6 veggies and servings of fruits for a given day for our fist size for the women, and then those cupped handfuls for the healthy carbohydrates, 4 to 6 of those throughout a given day, and your 4 to 6 healthy fats throughout a given day. That is your magic equation towards the outcomes that you're after. It's a healthy body, that lean body, that performing body, and everything else mentally that comes with that, right? Now keep in mind, there are plateaus that can start to happen, and so that's where the outcomes-based decision-making comes into play, right? Be prepared based on your consistent following through on that plan without break, without any sort of lack of adherence or commitment to that or compliance to the plan, right? Then we would maybe start 1 to 2 less of those handfuls, fists, or thumbfuls in a given day, right? We're adjusting and reassessing as we go. So if your magic number of 6 to 8 for guys wasn't working on it, you started at 8, you might drop down to 7 or 6. Same thing, ladies, if you're starting at 6 servings per day, work your way down to 5 or 4 per day, and stay constant and adjust as you go, right? Most studies are going to show that the most common reason for weight gain is actually the intermittent lack of adherence, right? And it's nothing more complicated than we need to think of. It's I know sometimes people are asking us about refeeds or cheat meals and cheat days, and that type of a science isn't actually necessary or required for our people, our movers, our athletes, until a really, really lean body composition. Men, you guys need to start thinking about and planning for refeeds truly and physiologically when you're in between that 6 to 9% body fat. Ladies, refeed only becomes physiologically necessary and balancing those hormones when we're in that 16 to 19% body fat. So if you guys are getting close to that, we can start to talk a little more detail and a little bit more science on the necessity of a refeed. Other than that, it's just sticking to our planned 6 to 8 servings of each per day for men, our planned 4 to 6 servings per day for women. All of the other carb cycling and calorie cycling isn't necessarily required until we get into those ranges for the refeed we talked about in that really, really low and lean ranges of body fat there. So what to do in the meantime? We said we're making our adjustments, whether it's 1 to 2 servings less per day, but also taking a look at some of those other factors that we can increase our calories burnt. We talked about that NEAT, that non-exercise activity, thermodynamic burn and energy there. Getting that up, right? Increasing that throughout the day. One thing I like to play with, it's called pay the toll. And it's something that you know when you've got, say, a walkway that you're passing through pretty constant throughout the day, set up some little fun rules, right? Every time I get up to go to the bathroom, I'm gonna do 10 squats. Every time I pass through this doorway, I wanna do 5 burpees. Every time I get to this, place, this place in the parking lot, I'm gonna do 10 ice skaters. Whatever that might be, just some fun little ways to increase that thermodynamic burn, right? Whether it's elevating and working from a standing position, right? Having that raised desk, those things add up, and if they could be 100 calories today, they could be thousands of calories by the end of the month. So seek those out, look for those types of things. We talked about that resting metabolic rate. We're getting a good balance in. Super important that we have the balance of the cardiovascular, the resistance training, and the recovery training. So if you're not investing enough time, if you're just kind of skating towards your favorite days of results, remember all 3 of those are planned and programmed in there for your benefit and for your outcomes. So make sure you're getting those in, right? Our Tuesdays and Thursdays are gonna be those high intensity interval days. That's your heavy cardio. And then the Monday, Wednesday, Friday, a good solid base of resistance. And are you getting enough recovery, right? Get that recovery in, plan to spend that. If you can get 15 minutes a day, great. If you can get 2 to 3 hours in per week, great. Of the recovery, the foam roll, and the stretching, that can all help you get better results as well. And last but not least, we don't talk about it enough, but it does have a huge impact, your sleep. How you doing with your sleep? By doing that, you're gonna reduce the stress, you're gonna reduce the inflammation, you're gonna get better results. Studies show you're gonna retain less water, you're gonna be losing more fat, and all of that is good. We're looking for that. Lastly, we spend a little bit more time about mindfulness as well. So in your mindfulness, you might have an imperfect day, and that's totally natural, totally human. We all do that. I encourage you to feel good about it, not feel guilty about it. I encourage you to really embrace that relationship with food, knowing that you're gonna have that one down or that one off meal, and you can jump right back to it. Don't let that snowball become that flat tire syndrome where you're falling totally off track and having to start from square one again, right? If you had it, great, don't feel bad about it. Jump right back to it, because when you can have that type of relationship with food, most of those studies are gonna show a better relationship with food, leading to lower BMI, leading to lower body weight, leading to even as far as lower reports of calorie intake, and ultimately that stress, that anxiety, those types of factors are going to be reduced as well. So all of those are healthy, important things as we continue to redefine and reestablish a healthy relationship with food, activity, and finding this balance. So I hope all of these factors give you something to think about. Maybe you kind of perk your ears up towards one thing or another. You don't have to be perfect. You don't have to hit them all at the same time. Listen to that one thing that really just struck you as most important this week to dive into. Give it your all, give it your focus, reassess, and based on your outcome, make that next decision to continue on your best path here. See you guys back here for next week, and continued success.